Humanity's creators turned tormentors stared down at the primitive civilization they birthed, looking upon it only as a mistake to sterilize. But would the aliens' creation meekly obey its own extermination? Jesse stared bleary-eyed at his data screen in the Mount Wilson Observatory in Los Angeles. He took a swig of black coffee as the repetitive stellar radio waves scrolled by like an endless stock ticker. Suddenly, an anomaly appeared. Jesse wheeled his chair closer, typing commands in a frenzy to isolate the signal. His heart pounded as the alien signal resolved, an unmistakable message from a non-human sender. The screen flashed red. "They are coming!" Jesse jolted back from the console, his mouth agape, goosebumps racing down his skin. The lab's fluorescent lights flickered as the space behind Jesse warped and twisted. A hulking alien being faded into existence, looming over the shocked astrophysicist. Jesse scrambled from his chair, his mind screaming, "Run!" but his legs frozen in fear. "I am Primus of the Tholian race. We have returned to correct our gravest mistake, your very existence. 500,000 years ago, we seeded this planet with your genetically modified ancestors as an ambitious evolution experiment. But now we see the results are an aberration, a threat. So we have come to cleanse the galaxy of our sin by erasing you for all time." Jesse's mind raced, reeling from the revelations. He was face to face with humanity's creators. No, not creators, but arrogant alien conquerors who saw humans only as lab rats and vermin to exterminate. Yet Jesse was not just any human. He was the one who intercepted the signal, the one given knowledge of humanity's terrifying origins and precarious fate. The fate of mankind hung in the hands of a sleep-deprived LA scientist challenging an ancient alien empire. Jesse set his jaw, his eyes hardening with human defiance. Could one man deceive an invincible extraterrestrial fleet? Could one man persuade remorseless alien oppressors to stay their hand of total annihilation? Could one man outwit the malevolent intelligence that birthed his race as a mere cosmic error? Because only one human stood between humanity's deliverance and its omnicide. Jesse's legs trembled as he struggled to process the alien's revelation. "You're saying humans are just some experiment that got out of control? That you created us? Bullshit." Primus swiped a clawed hand through the air, conjuring a shimmering hologram. "See for yourself, human." The projection showed a lush primordial jungle teeming with primitive hominids. Sleek silver ships descended from the sky, levitating the primates into examination chambers. Jesse watched wide-eyed as the Tholians probed and prodded at the specimens, extracting tissue samples. The scene shifted to a sterile lab, filled with bubbling vats of green liquid. Inside floated malformed fetuses, their DNA visibly mutating as the Tholians manipulated the helixes. Jesse felt bile rise in his throat as he saw the aliens playing God. "We seeded your world with genetically enhanced primates and then guided their development," Primus explained. "Atlantis, Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, Stonehenge, all Tholian gifts to spur your advancement. We even sent emissaries to pose as your gods and prophets." Religious symbols flashed through the hologram, the cross, the star and crescent, the Dharma wheel, all pulsing with alien energy signatures. Jesse shook his head in denial, every belief he held unraveling. "No, this is insane. You're saying our entire history is a lie? Our religions, our greatest achievements, all just part of your twisted experiment?" "An experiment which has failed disastrously," Primus said. "We thought you had potential, but your species has proven uncontrollable. Your self-destructive tendencies threaten the stability of the galaxy. We cannot allow our creation to cause such chaos." "Humanity isn't perfect, but we're trying to be better," Jesse argued. "We've made mistakes, but we're learning from them. Isn't that what you wanted? For us to grow and evolve?" Primus shook his head. "Your growth has exceeded tolerable parameters. The time has come to end our experiment and start anew. You can join us in resetting Earth, or perish with the rest of your kind. Choose wisely, human." Before Jesse could respond, the alien shimmered and vanished, the lab light stabilizing in his absence. Jesse slumped against the wall, his mind reeling. In one conversation, his entire worldview had shattered. Humanity's creators had passed judgment. And unless Jesse could stop them, the apocalypse was nigh. His hand shaking, Jesse grabbed his phone to call the one person who might make sense of this madness, Dr. Samir Patel. The phone rang once before Samir's voice came through. "Jesse, do you have any idea what time—" "Samir, I need you at the lab now. It's an emergency." There must have been something in Jesse's voice that conveyed the gravity of the situation, because Samir simply said, "I'm on my way," before hanging up. 15 minutes later, Samir burst into the lab, his hair disheveled and his eyes wide. "Jesse, what's going on? You sounded like you'd seen a ghost." Jesse let out a humorless laugh. "I wish it was a ghost. I think I just met our creator and he wants to destroy us." Jesse recounted his encounter with Primus, watching Samir's face shift from disbelief to horror as he described the Tholians' plan to reset Earth. When he finished, Samir slumped into a chair, his face ashen. "This is a lot to process. Are you sure it wasn't some kind of hallucination? Maybe the signal you intercepted was some kind of psychoactive frequency." Jesse shook his head. "It was real, Samir. I can still feel Primus's presence, like a weight pressing down on my mind. And look at this." He pulled up the holographic recording Primus had shown him, watching Samir's eyes widen as he saw the undeniable proof of the Tholians' genetic tampering. "My God, it's all true. They really did create us," Samir whispered. "But why reveal themselves now? Why give us this warning?" "I don't know. But I do know that we can't just sit back and let them wipe us out. We have to find a way to stop them." Samir nodded, the shock in his eyes hardening into determination. "You're right. If anyone can figure out how to beat these bastards, it's us. Let's start by analyzing that hologram. There might be some clues hidden in the Tholian technology." They worked through the night, poring over the data with a growing sense of urgency. Jesse's fingers flew across the keyboard as he ran simulation after simulation, trying to find a weakness in the Tholians' genetic engineering. But as the hours ticked by, strange things started happening in the lab. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Whispers seemed to emanate from the darkened corners, the words just beyond the edge of comprehension. Samir looked up from his microscope, his brow furrowed. "Do you hear that? It sounds like chanting." Before Jesse could respond, the temperature in the room plummeted, their breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form twisted and grotesque. Pulsing veins throbbed beneath its mottled skin, and its eyes glowed a malevolent red. "I abandon your foolish quest," the creature hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Submit to the will of the Tholians, or suffer the consequences." Jesse stepped forward, his fists clenched. "We won't let you destroy our world. We'll fight you with everything we have." The creature let out a blood-curdling shriek, its razor-sharp claws extending as it lunged towards them. Jesse and Samir scrambled backwards, knocking over chairs and equipment in their haste to escape. They managed to make it to the door, slamming it shut just as the creature's claws scraped against the metal. Jesse fumbled with the lock, his heart pounding in his ears. "What the hell was that thing?" Samir gasped, his face white with terror. "I don't know, but I get the feeling it won't be the last we see of the Tholians. We need to get out of here, regroup, and come up with a plan." With a final glance at the shuddering door, they fled into the night, the weight of humanity's fate heavy on their shoulders. Jesse grabbed his backpack, stuffing it with laptops, hard drives, and portable lab equipment. Samir watched him, his hands trembling slightly as he zipped up his own bag. The adrenaline from their encounter with the Tholian creature still coursed through their veins, but they knew they couldn't let fear paralyze them. They had to act fast. "We need more information," Jesse said, his voice tight with tension. "If we're going to have any chance of stopping the Tholians, we need to understand their technology, their motivations, everything." Samir nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "But where do we even start? It's not like we can just Google ancient alien civilizations and expect to find answers." Jesse paused, a glimmer of an idea forming in his mind. Maybe we can't, but I know someone who might be able to help. My old mentor, Professor Arthur Blackwood. He's been studying ancient alien civilizations for years, but most of the scientific community thinks he's a crackpot. You think he might know something about the Tholians? It's worth a shot. He always said that the key to understanding our origins lay in the past, in the fragments of ancient cultures that we've dismissed as myth and legend. If anyone can make sense of this, it's him. Samir hesitated, his doubts plain on his face. But he trusted Jesse, and he knew they couldn't afford to leave any stone unturned. All right, let's go see this Professor Blackwood. Where does he live? Last I heard, he was living in a cabin out in the woods somewhere up north. I'll give him a call, see if he's willing to meet with us. Jesse pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. The line rang once, twice, 3 times, and then a gruff voice answered. Hello? Professor Blackwood, it's Jesse Adams. I don't know if you remember me, but I was one of your students at... Of course I remember you, Jesse. You were one of the few who actually listened to my lectures instead of just waiting for the bell to ring. What can I do for you? Jesse took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I need your help, Professor. I've stumbled onto something big, something that could change everything we thought we knew about human history. I can't explain it over the phone, but it has to do with ancient alien civilizations. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Professor Blackwood spoke again, his voice was low and urgent. Come to my cabin. I'll send you the coordinates, and Jesse, be careful. If what you've found is what I think it is, you're in more danger than you can possibly imagine. The line went dead, leaving Jesse staring at his phone with a growing sense of unease. He turned to Samir, who was watching him with a questioning look. He agreed to meet with us, but he sounded scared, like he knows something he's not telling us. Samir shouldered his backpack, his jaw set with determination. Then let's go find out what it is. We don't have any time to waste. They loaded up Jesse's battered old Jeep and set off into the night. The coordinates Professor Blackwood had sent them programmed into the GPS. As they drove, the city lights faded behind them, replaced by the inky darkness of the forest. The road twisted and turned, the headlights casting eerie shadows on the trees. Jesse gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the reach of the headlights. Beside him, Samir fidgeted nervously, his eyes darting from side to side. "Do you hear that?" he asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Jesse strained his ears, trying to hear over the rumble of the engine. At first there was nothing, but then he heard it. A faint whisper carried on the wind, the words just beyond the edge of comprehension. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, a disembodied voice that sent shivers down his spine. He pressed down on the accelerator, the Jeep surging forward as if it could outrun the unseen presence. But the whispers only grew louder, more insistent, until they filled the air like a swarm of buzzing insects. And then, just as suddenly as they had begun, the whispers fell silent. Jesse and Samir exchanged a glance, their faces pale in the ghostly light of the dashboard. "What the hell was that?" Samir asked, his voice shaking. Jesse shook his head, unable to find the words. He had a sinking feeling that whatever it was just the beginning. They drove on in silence, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. After what felt like an eternity, they finally arrived at the coordinates Professor Blackwood had given them. A small cabin nestled in a clearing, its windows dark and shuttered. Jesse and Samir approached cautiously, their footsteps loud in the stillness of the night. Jesse raised his hand to knock on the door, but before he could, it swung open, revealing Professor Blackwood standing in the doorway. He looked older than Jesse remembered, his hair grey and his face lined with worry. But his eyes were sharp and alert, darting from Jesse to Samir and back again. "Come in quickly," he said, ushering them inside. "We don't have much time." The cabin was cluttered with books and papers, ancient artifacts and strange devices scattered across every surface. Professor Blackwood led them to a small sitting room, gesturing for them to take a seat on a worn leather couch. "I know why you're here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You've seen them, haven't you, the Tholians?" Jesse and Samir exchanged a startled glance. "How did you—" Professor Blackwood waved his hand dismissively. "I've been studying them for years, ever since I first stumbled across a reference to them in an ancient Sumerian text. I've uncovered evidence of their interventions throughout human history, from the dawn of civilization to the present day." He began to pace the room, his hands gesturing wildly as he spoke. "They've been manipulating us, guiding our evolution and our development, shaping us into something they can use, and now they're here to collect on their investment." Jesse leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What do you mean, collect on their investment? What do they want from us?" Professor Blackwood stopped pacing, his eyes haunted. "They want to reset the experiment, to start over with a new batch of test subjects, and they'll wipe out every last one of us to do it." Samir shook his head in disbelief. "But why? Why go to all this trouble just to destroy us in the end?" "Because we're flawed," Professor Blackwood said, his voice bitter. "We're unpredictable, uncontrollable. We don't fit into their neat little equations, so they're going to erase us like a mistake on a chalkboard." Jesse clenched his fists, anger and fear warring in his gut. "We have to stop them. There has to be a way." Professor Blackwood nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "There might be. I've been working on something, a device that could—" But before he could finish his sentence, the cabin began to shake violently, the walls creaking and groaning as if they were about to collapse. A blinding light filled the room, so bright that Jesse had to shield his eyes. When the light faded, Jesse blinked away the spots dancing in his vision, and there, standing in the middle of the room, was Primus, flanked by a group of Tholian warriors. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, their skin pulsing with strange, alien energy. "Surrender," Primus said, his voice cold and implacable. "Submit to the will of the Tholians, and your end will be swift and painless." Professor Blackwood stepped forward, his face set with defiance. "We will never submit to you. Humanity will fight to the last breath." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, strangely shaped device, its surface etched with alien glyphs. "I've spent my life studying your technology, trying to unlock its secrets, and now I have the key." He pressed a button on the device, and it began to glow with a pulsing white light. Primus's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. "What have you done, old man?" Professor Blackwood smiled grimly. "I've reverse-engineered your own technology. This device is attuned to your genetic signature. One push of a button, and it will tear you apart on a molecular level." Primus took a step forward, his claws flexing. "You are bluffing. No human could possibly—" "Care to test that theory?" Professor Blackwood asked, his finger hovering over the button. The Tholians exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken. Jesse and Samir watched in tense silence, hardly daring to breathe. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and the next move would decide everything. Professor Blackwood's thumb slammed down on the alien device's glowing button. The air shimmered as a wave of crackling energy exploded outward, slamming into Primus and his Tholian warriors. The aliens staggered back, their exoskeletons sparking and popping. "Run!" Blackwood bellowed. Jesse and Samir didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted out the cabin door into the moonlit forest, branches whipping at their faces as they barreled through the undergrowth. Blackwood was right behind them, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. Enraged shrieks and crashing foliage told them the Tholians had recovered from the pulse and were in hot pursuit. Jesse's heart jackhammered against his ribs as he leaped over a fallen log. Samir stumbled, but quickly righted himself. "How long will that device keep them off us?" Jesse shouted. "Not long," Blackwood panted. "It's just a prototype of a Tholian evolution manipulation weapon, but it might be the key to stopping their reset." They ran until Jesse's lungs seared and his legs wobbled. Just as he thought they'd have to turn and fight, Blackwood veered toward a tangle of vines and brush. He shoved the foliage aside, revealing a hatch hidden in the forest floor. "Inside, quickly!" They piled in, and Blackwood spun the hatch's wheel, bolting it shut. Lights flickered on, illuminating a bunker packed to the brim with Tholian artifacts. Strange metallic orbs, glowing crystals, pulsing obelisks. Samir gaped at it all. "You've been busy, Professor." Blackwood was already rummaging through the trove, tossing items aside. A lifetime of preparing for this day. As the professor searched for some key item, Jesse examined the artifacts. One symbol kept appearing, a pulsating spiral that seared into his vision. He pointed it out to Blackwood. "What is that? I'm seeing it everywhere." Blackwood frowned, his face lined with dread. "The mark of the Overseers, the highest Tholian caste. Primus is just their lackey. They're the true threat behind the reset." Suddenly alarms screeched through the bunker. Crimson lights bathed the room. On a security feed they saw Tholians flooding the forest outside, peeling back the hatch with their bare claws. "They've breached the perimeter," Samir cried. Blackwood tossed them each a glowing Tholian blade, crackling with otherworldly energies. Jesse hefted the alien weapon, his blood turning to ice as he realized this was it. Do or die for all humanity. The bunker shook as the Tholians tore through the reinforced door with their razor-sharp claws. Jesse gripped his crackling alien blade tighter as Professor Blackwood and Samir took up defensive positions. The Tholians burst in, a whirlwind of flashing exoskeletons and glowing red eyes. Jesse lunged forward, his blade clashing against a Tholian's claws with a shower of sparks. He ducked as another Tholian swiped at his head, then blasted it point-blank with a pulse from his weapon. The air filled with the stench of seared alien flesh. Across the bunker, Professor Blackwood unleashed a torrent of energy from an alien cannon, vaporizing two Tholians, but more poured in, slashing with their claws. One raked across Blackwood's chest, shredding his shirt and drawing blood. The professor cried out in pain but kept fighting. Explosions rocked the room as Samir fired an alien grenade launcher, collapsing the entrance tunnel on a group of Tholians. But a hulking warrior barreled through the rubble, tackling Samir to the ground. Jesse whirled and kicked the Tholian off his friend, then finished it off with a slice of his blade. "Jesse!" Blackwood called out weakly. Jesse saw the professor slumped against a crate, his shirt soaked with blood. Jesse raced to his mentor's side, blasting Tholians out of his way. "You must find the Nexus," Blackwood gasped, pressing a strange crystalline device into Jesse's hand. "The truth is there." The professor's eyes glazed over, and his head lolled to the side. "No!" Jesse cried. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them away. There was no time to mourn. "Jesse, come on!" Samir yelled, dragging him towards a hidden door. Jesse looked down at the crystal in his hand, then over to Blackwood's still form. Gritting his teeth, he nodded to Samir and punched a code into the door panel that Blackwood had shown them earlier. The door slid open, revealing a dark tunnel. Jesse and Samir plunged into it, Samir laying down, covering fire behind them. The tunnel shook as more explosions tore through the bunker. The door sealed shut, plunging them into blackness. Jesse clicked on a flashlight, and it played across the damp stone walls of what looked like an ancient underground passageway. They took off at a run, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Jesse's mind raced as he tried to make sense of Blackwood's final words. The Nexus, a Tholian installation deep within the earth. Was that where they had been manipulating humanity's evolution for millennia? And what truth lay hidden there? As if in answer, Jesse's vision suddenly filled with a blinding light. He staggered, nearly dropping the crystal. Images flooded his mind. Atlantis, sinking beneath the waves. The pyramids, rising block by block, under the watchful eye of reptilian overlords. The great library of Alexandria, burning as robed figures fled into the night. Earth's secret history, shaped by Tholian hands. "Jesse?" Samir's concerned voice snapped him back to the present. "What's wrong?" Guys, I saw... Jesse shook his head, trying to clear it. I think this crystal is showing me visions of the past. Samir frowned, his eyes widening as he looked at Jesse's hand. Jesse, your hand... Jesse glanced down and gasped. The crystal was fused to his palm, glowing with a pulsing inner light. He tried to pry it off, but it wouldn't budge. Never mind that now, Jesse said, a grim determination filling him. We have to keep moving. We have to find this nexus. They pressed on, the tunnel snaking deeper and deeper into the earth. The walls seemed to throb with an unearthly energy, and strange symbols appeared and vanished in the dancing light of their flashlights. Jesse's head pounded as more visions assaulted him. He saw gleaming cities of glass and steel, and wastelands of ash and bone. He saw a figure in a lab coat, their face obscured, injecting a glowing substance into a human test subject. The human spasmed and then began to change, their DNA unraveling and reknitting in new forms. And through it all, the spiral symbol of the overseers, watching, waiting. "Jesse, look!" Samir's shout jolted him out of the vision. The tunnel had opened up into a massive cavern, its walls lined with pulsing Tholian technology. In the center stood a towering monolith, glowing with an eerie blue light. "The Nexus," Jesse breathed. They approached cautiously, the air thrumming with power. Suddenly 3 figures shimmered into existence before the monolith, Tholians but different, taller, more regal, with an aura of immense power radiating from them. "The Overseers." "Welcome, humans," the central figure spoke, its voice echoing inside Jesse's skull. "You have come far, struggled valiantly, but your battle is over." It gestured to the monolith. "Behold the Nexus, the culmination of our grand experiment, the guiding light for your species." Images flashed through Jesse's mind, almost too fast to comprehend. He saw the branching paths of human evolution, saw the Tholians pruning and shaping it like a bonsai tree, saw them culling the weak, promoting the strong, guiding humanity towards some unknowable endgame. "You have been chosen," the Overseer said, "chosen to join us, to help guide your species to its ultimate destiny, a destiny we have shaped." Jesse felt the pull of the Overseer's mind, felt his own consciousness being subsumed into the vast alien intellect. It would be so easy to give in, to let them take control. "No," Samir's shout broke the spell. "We won't be your puppets. Humanity makes its own destiny." The Overseer's eyes narrowed. "So be it." It raised a hand crackling with energy. Jesse braced himself for oblivion. But the crystal in his hand pulsed, and a bolt of light shot out, striking the Overseer. It reeled back, hissing. Jesse looked at the crystal, then at the monolith, the Nexus, the heart of the Tholian's power, and he knew what he had to do. He charged forward, the crystal burning like a star in his hand. The Overseer screamed as he plunged it into the monolith. Cracks spread across the surface, leaking blinding light. "Jesse!" Samir screamed. The cavern shook, rocks raining down. An explosion of light, and then... silence. Jesse and Samir strained against the Overseer's psychic onslaught, their minds feeling like they would splinter under the pressure. But they couldn't let the Tholians win, couldn't let them erase everything humanity had fought for. With a primal scream of defiance, Jesse activated the crystal device. It pulsed in his hand, resonating with the Nexus's energy field. The Overseers reeled back, their psychic grip shattering as a surge of blinding light exploded outwards. Jesse and Samir didn't hesitate. They charged forward into the heart of the Nexus, following a pulsing conduit that seemed to be guiding their way. Strange creatures lurched out of the shadows, biomechanical abominations that were half Tholian, half machine. Jesse blasted one with a bolt from his crystal, while Samir grappled with another, ripping out its pulsating power core with his bare hands. They fought their way forward, a human tornado of improvisation and desperate fury. At last they reached the Nexus's core, a cavernous chamber thrumming with alien energy. And there at the center was a massive crystalline structure, the source of the Nexus's power. But as they approached, a final cohort of Overseers materialized before them, led by Primus himself. Fools, Primus bellowed. The Nexus is more than a mere tool. It is a weapon to reshape the very fabric of reality. With it, we will reset not just your pitiful Earth, but the entire universe. We will create a new reality, one where the Tholian Empire reigns supreme for all eternity. Like hell you will, Jesse snarled. He and Samir opened fire, energy bolts and pulse blasts crisscrossing the chamber. The Overseers attacked with vicious telekinetic strikes, but the humans fought back with every ounce of skill and determination they had left. As the battle reached a fever pitch, Jesse suddenly saw the horrible truth. There was only one way to stop the Tholians' insane plan. The Nexus had to be destroyed, no matter the cost. He locked eyes with Samir across the melee, a look of grim understanding passing between them. With a final nod, Jesse turned and sprinted for the crystalline core, dodging energy blasts and psychic strikes. He leaped forward, slamming the crystal key into the shimmering lattice. Immediately, the Nexus began to overload, eldritch energies surging out of control. Jesse held on as long as he could, the device searing his flesh, cosmic power flooding through him. Destruction and creation danced behind his eyes, the death and birth of universes. With a final cry, he let go, the explosion consuming him utterly. Samir hurled himself behind a pylon as a maelstrom of light and fire erupted, vaporizing the Overseers. Primus, everything. The entire Nexus collapsed in on itself, millennia of Tholian power and planning crumbling to dust. Then it was over. Silence. Samir stumbled from the rubble, bleeding and shell-shocked. He gazed upon the devastation. The bulk of the Tholian infestation had been scoured clean. Earth was safe. Humanity was free. But as he turned to leave, a faint glow caught his eye. A shard of crystal poking from the debris, pulsing softly. A chill ran down Samir's spine. Perhaps the Tholian threat wasn't as extinct as it seemed. Samir's hands trembled as he sifted through the debris of the shattered Nexus. Chunks of alien metal, tangles of bizarre circuitry. His eyes stung from the acrid smoke still curling from the ruins, but he forced himself to keep searching. There had to be something left, some clue to make sense of the chaos and carnage. A faint glow in the rubble caught his eye. Samir scrambled over and brushed away the dust, revealing a small shard of crystal, pulsing with an eerie inner light. He plucked it from the wreckage, rolling it in his palm. It hummed against his skin. Samir pocketed the shard and hauled himself out of the Nexus ruins. Making his way through the twisting caverns, he emerged into the forest. The night wind whipped at his face. He needed answers, a plan, and he couldn't get them here. The abandoned warehouse loomed at the edge of the city, rusting and desolate. Samir hauled the crates of salvaged Tholian tech inside, locking the door behind him. He cobbled together a makeshift lab from the dusty equipment left behind, microscopes, scanners, tools. Late into the night, Samir pored over the alien devices. Wires and components littered the floor around him, coffee cups piled up on the workbench, but always his gaze kept returning to the shard. Under the microscope, its facets danced with mesmerizing patterns, seeming to shift before his eyes. Samir adjusted the focus and caught his breath. There, etched into the crystal's lattice at a near-molecular level, was a message, a compressed data stream, encoded in pulsing light. Samir's fingers flew over the keyboard as he worked to decrypt it. The shard's glow intensified, projecting a shimmering hologram into the air. Jesse's face, flickering and translucent, hovered before him. Samir's heart clenched at the sight of his friend. "Samir," the recording began. Jesse's voice was strained, his eyes haunted. "If you're seeing this, then I didn't make it. But there are things you need to know. The Nexus, the Tholians' plan. It's worse than we ever imagined." Samir leaned forward, his knuckles white against the workbench. Jesse's message continued, laying out a horrifying revelation. The Tholians weren't the true masterminds. They were merely acolytes of something far more sinister, the Void Sovereign, a malevolent entity from the spaces between dimensions, an incomprehensible horror that hungered to unmake reality itself. The Nexus had been the key to the Void Sovereign's arrival, a cosmic doorway for its consciousness to spill through. Jesse's sacrifice had sealed that door, but only temporarily. Even now, the Void Sovereign strained against the cracks, seeking entry to their universe. "You have to find a way to stop it, Samir," Jesse pleaded. "The fate of everything depends on you now. I'm sorry I can't be there to help, but I know you can do this. You have to." The hologram flickered out, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Samir slumped back in his chair, his mind reeling. The Tholians were just pawns. The real threat was still coming. But how could he stop an entity that existed beyond the very boundaries of their reality? Samir's gaze fell on the Tholian shard, still glowing softly on the workbench. Reaching out, he turned it over in his hands, studying the alien geometries of its surface. And then, like a spark leaping across a gap, an idea began to take shape. The Tholians' technology had allowed them to manipulate the barriers between dimensions. Perhaps that same technology could be turned against the Void Sovereign. Samir pulled up the scans of the Nexus, poring over the esoteric schematics and equations. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to construct a framework. Not a doorway, but a lock. A device to seal the cracks in reality and prevent the Void Sovereign's incursion. But as he worked, a whisper brushed against his thoughts, cold and oily. Samir froze, his soldering iron poised over the circuit board. The voice came again, echoing in the shadowed corners of his mind. Alien words that burned like acid, seething with malice and hunger. The Void Sovereign, reaching out to its greatest obstacle. Visions clawed at the edges of Samir's consciousness, writhing tentacles, gnashing teeth, an endless abyss of devouring nothingness. He gritted his teeth and pushed them away, focusing on the device taking shape beneath his hands. But the whispers only grew louder, the visions more insistent. Ghostly tendrils coiled around Samir's thoughts, trying to pull him into the void. He could feel the Sovereign's presence now, vast and ancient, straining against the boundaries of the universe. Time was running out. Samir's hands flew across the components, his breathing ragged. He had to finish the device, had to seal the breach before it was too late. The void. Sovereign's fury pulsed in his skull, crashing against his mental defenses like a battering ram. Samir's vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. But he pushed forward, clinging to the memory of Jesse's sacrifice, the fate of existence itself. With a final, desperate effort, Samir slotted the last piece into place. The device hummed to life, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. He could feel it pushing back against the Void Sovereign's presence, sealing the cracks in reality one by one. But the whispers in his mind rose to a crescendo, howling with thwarted rage. Spectral claws raked at his consciousness, trying to tear him apart from within. Samir screamed, his hands clutching at his head. Through the pain and chaos, he staggered to the device, his finger hovering over the activation switch. The Void Sovereign's essence surged forward in one final, desperate attempt to break through. Samir's vision shattered into a kaleidoscope of nightmare imagery, his sanity fraying at the edges. With a last defiant cry, he slammed his hand down on the switch. The device flared with blinding light, engulfing the warehouse in a searing pulse of energy. Samir felt the Void Sovereign's presence ripped away, torn from his mind like a jagged blade. And then silence. The whispers faded, the visions dissipating like mist. Samir collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The device lay quiet on the workbench, its purpose fulfilled. The breach was sealed. The Void Sovereign was banished, its incursion thwarted. But as Samir knelt there in the darkness, a coldness settled in his bones, an echo of the horrors he had glimpsed beyond the veil. He knew that this was only the beginning. The Tholians were broken, but their dark god still lurked in the spaces between realities, hungering for a way in, and there would always be others eager to take up the mantle, to pave the way for the Void Sovereign's return. The fight was far from over. But for now, in this brief moment of respite, Samir allowed himself a shuddering breath, a silent thanks to the friend who had sacrificed everything to give them this chance. He would carry on the fight, for Jesse, for humanity, for the very fabric of existence itself. No matter the cost, no matter the darkness that awaited, he would not let the Void Sovereign win. Samir pushed himself to his feet, his eyes hardening with resolve. There was still so much to do, so many battles ahead. But he had taken the first step, struck the first blow against the encroaching darkness. And as long as he still drew breath, he would not stop until the universe was safe, until the Void Sovereign was nothing more than a fading nightmare, banished to the abyss from whence it came. The road ahead would be long and treacherous, but Samir would walk it to the end. For the sake of all creation, he would not falter. He would not fail. He gathered up the device, the schematics, the remnants of the Tholian technology. The warehouse suddenly. Samir wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands shaking slightly as he made the final adjustments to the device. The pulsating light from the crystalline fragment cast an eerie glow over the warehouse, and the whispers in his mind grew more insistent with each passing moment. A sudden knock at the door startled him, and he reached for the Tholian energy weapon he had salvaged from the ruins of the Nexus. Cautiously, he approached the door and peered through the peephole. To his surprise, he saw a woman standing outside, her face etched with determination. Samir cracked open the door, keeping the energy weapon trained on the visitor. "Who are you and what do you want?" The woman held up her hands in a gesture of peace. "Dr. Samir Patel. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Blackwood. I'm Professor Arthur Blackwood's daughter." Samir's eyes widened in recognition. He had heard of Elizabeth Blackwood, a brilliant quantum physicist whose work on exotic matter had garnered significant attention in the scientific community. He lowered the weapon and opened the door, allowing her to enter. "I've been following my father's research," Elizabeth explained as she stepped inside. "His notes led me here to you and the remnants of the Nexus." Together they examined the device Samir had been constructing. Elizabeth's brow furrowed as she studied the schematics. "This is incredible work, but it's missing something crucial, a stabilizing agent to ensure the breach remains sealed." Samir nodded, his frustration evident. "I've been trying to find a suitable component, but nothing seems to work." Elizabeth's eyes lit up. "My father was researching a rare form of exotic matter called nullite. His notes suggest that it could be the key to stabilizing the device." She pulled up a map on her tablet, pointing to a location in the Mojave Desert. "According to his research, there's a secret Tholian facility hidden beneath the desert. That's where we'll find the nullite." Samir grabbed his gear, his mind racing with the possibilities. "Then we have no time to lose." The journey to the Mojave Desert was treacherous, the scorching sun beating down on them as they navigated the rugged terrain. They had to be cautious, as the remnants of the Tholian forces still guarded the area, their patrols sweeping the desert for any sign of intrusion. As they trekked deeper into the desert, Elizabeth shared her findings on the Tholians' influence on Earth. "They've been manipulating our evolution for thousands of years, but that's not all," she said, her voice low. "They've also been seeding the planet with hidden caches of their technology, waiting for the right moment to activate them." Samir's blood ran cold at the implications. The Tholians' reach extended far beyond what they had initially believed. After hours of grueling travel, they finally reached the coordinates of the secret facility. The entrance was hidden beneath a large rock formation, the Tholian symbols etched into the stone, barely visible to the untrained eye. As they approached the entrance, they noticed signs of a recent battle, scorch marks from energy weapons and the scattered remains of Tholian exoskeletons. They exchanged a wary glance and readied their weapons, unsure of what they might find inside. The facility was in a state of disarray, with shattered equipment and flickering lights. They moved cautiously through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Suddenly, they heard movement ahead, and they took cover behind a damaged console. To their surprise, a group of Tholians emerged from the shadows, but they were unlike any they had encountered before. Their exoskeletons were a deep, mottled blue, and their eyes glowed a soft, pulsing white. One of the Tholians stepped forward, its voice resonating in their minds. "We are not your enemies, humans. We are the Tholian resistance, those who have broken away from the overseers and their devotion to the Void Sovereign. Samir and Elizabeth lowered their weapons slightly, still wary but intrigued by this unexpected development. The Tholian continued, "We have been working to prevent the Void Sovereign's arrival, just as your Professor Blackwood was. We aided him in his research, hoping to find a way to seal the breach between dimensions." The Resistance fighters led them deeper into the facility, guiding them to a secure chamber where a small pulsating orb of nullite was stored. As Samir and Elizabeth began the delicate process of integrating the nullite into the device, the whispers in Samir's mind grew more intense, and he found himself gripped by visions of the Void Sovereign's imminent arrival. He saw the fabric of reality tearing apart, the Void Sovereign's vast, incomprehensible form emerging from the darkness. The pressure mounted as they raced to complete the device, the fate of the universe hanging in the balance. With trembling hands, Samir made the final connections, the device humming to life with a brilliant otherworldly glow. The nullite pulsed at its core, the exotic matter stabilizing the breach and pushing back against the Void Sovereign's encroaching presence. But even as they celebrated this small victory, the whispers in Samir's mind reached a crescendo, and he collapsed to the ground, his eyes rolling back in his head. Elizabeth and the Tholian resistance fighters gathered around him, their faces etched with concern. In his mind's eye, Samir saw the Void Sovereign's realm, a twisted, impossible landscape of shifting geometries and writhing shadows, and there, at the center of it all, was the Sovereign itself, its gaze fixed upon him with an intensity that threatened to shatter his very being. "You cannot stop me, human," the Void Sovereign's voice boomed, echoing through the depths of Samir's consciousness. "I am the inevitability that awaits all of creation. Your struggle is futile." Samir gritted his teeth, pushing back against the Sovereign's overwhelming presence. "We will fight you with every ounce of our being," he declared, his voice raw with determination. "Humanity will not submit to your tyranny." The Void Sovereign let out a terrible, mocking laugh, the sound reverberating through Samir's skull. "You have only delayed the—" "Inevitable," the Void Sovereign taunted, its voice an eldritch chorus of madness. "Your struggle is as meaningless as your existence. Submit and embrace the glory of oblivion." Samir gritted his teeth, pushing himself to his feet. "Never," he spat. "Humanity will never submit to you." The vision shattered, and Samir found himself back in the facility, the device thrumming with power in his hands. Elizabeth helped him to his feet, her face etched with concern. "We have to hurry," she said. "The breach won't stay sealed for long." They raced through the twisting corridors of the facility, the device's glow illuminating their path. As they neared the surface, they could feel the Void Sovereign's presence growing stronger, the very air trembling with its malevolent energy. They emerged into the scorching desert sun, the ruins of the Nexus looming before them. The breach between dimensions shimmered and pulsed, a writhing tear in the fabric of reality. Samir and Elizabeth approached the breach, the device held aloft, but before they could activate it, a figure materialized before them, blocking their path. Primus, his exoskeleton cracked and scorched, stood before them, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. "You fools," he rasped. "You cannot stop the Void Sovereign. It is the inevitable end of all things." Samir's eyes narrowed. "You're working with the rogue faction. Why?" Primus let out a bitter laugh. "To redeem myself, to atone for my sins. I see now that the overseers were wrong. The Void Sovereign will consume us all." He held out a clawed hand. "Give me the device. Together we can seal the breach, prevent the Sovereign's arrival." Samir hesitated, glancing at Elizabeth. She nodded, and he handed the device to Primus. The Tholian grasped the device, his claws clicking against its surface. But as he began to activate it, his body convulsed, his eyes flaring with a sickly, pulsating light. "No," he gasped. "I can feel it, the Void Sovereign. It's taking control." Primus's form twisted and warped, his exoskeleton cracking and reshaping itself into a grotesque, nightmarish form. His voice deepened, echoing with the Void Sovereign's malevolent power. "Foolish mortals," the possessed Primus bellowed. "You cannot stop the inevitable. The Void Sovereign will enter this reality and all will be consumed." He turned to the breach, the device glowing with a sickly, corrupted light. Tendrils of darkness began to seep through the tear, reaching out hungrily. Samir and Elizabeth lunged forward, grappling with the possessed Primus. They fought desperately, the device tumbling from the Tholian's grasp. Elizabeth dove for the device, her fingers closing around it. But Primus's claws slashed out, tearing through her flesh. She cried out in pain, blood seeping through her fingers. Samir roared in fury, tackling Primus to the ground. They rolled across the sand, locked in a deadly embrace. Elizabeth staggered to her feet, the device clutched to her chest. With her last ounce of strength, she staggered towards the breach, her blood staining the sand. Samir struggled against Primus's inhuman strength, the Tholian's claws raking across his flesh. But he could see Elizabeth from the corner of his eye, the device glowing brightly in her hands. With a final desperate effort, Elizabeth activated the device, a blinding pulse of energy erupting from its core. The breach convulsed, the tendrils of darkness recoiling as if burned. Primus screamed, the Void Sovereign's essence ripped from his body. The Tholian collapsed to the ground, his exoskeleton crumbling to dust. The breach pulsed one final time, then sealed itself, the tear in reality knitting closed. The device fell from Elizabeth's hands, its purpose fulfilled. Samir scrambled to Elizabeth's side, cradling her in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes glazed with pain. "We did it," she whispered, a faint smile on her lips. "We stopped them." Samir nodded, tears streaking his face. "You did it, Elizabeth. You saved us all." Elizabeth's hand reached up, brushing against Samir's cheek. "Promise me," she breathed. "Promise me you'll keep fighting, that you won't let our sacrifices be in vain." Samir clasped her hand, his voice choked with emotion. "I promise I won't let you down." Elizabeth smiled one last time, her eyes drifting closed. Her hand went limp in Samir's grasp, her final breath escaping her lips. Samir held her close, his body shaking with grief. Around him the ruins of the Nexus stood silent, a testament to the battles fought and the lives lost. In the distance Primus stirred, his body ravaged by the Void Sovereign's influence. He dragged himself towards Samir, his voice a rasping whisper. "Forgive me," he croaked. "I was a fool. I thought I could control the Sovereign's power, use it for my own ends, but it consumed me, as it consumes all things." Samir looked down at the broken Tholian, his eyes hard. Was it worth it? All the death, all the suffering? Primus shook his head. "No, nothing is worth the price we paid, but you, human, you have a chance to protect your world, to keep the darkness at bay." The Tholian's body convulsed, his exoskeleton crumbling to dust. His final words hung in the air, a whispered plea. "Don't let our mistakes be yours. Don't let the void claim your future." Samir stood, Elizabeth's body cradled in his arms. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, a burden he knew he would carry for the rest of his days. He turned his back on the ruins of the Nexus, the device that had saved them all clutched in his hand. The sun beat down on the desert sands, a harsh and unforgiving light. But Samir walked on, his steps heavy but determined. He had made a promise, and he would keep it no matter the cost. For Elizabeth, for Jesse, for all those who had fought and died to keep the darkness at bay. The war was over, but the battle for Earth's future had only just begun. Samir walked out of the Nexus ruins, carrying Elizabeth's lifeless body in his arms. The desert sun scorched the sands around him, the heat oppressive and unforgiving, but he barely felt it, his mind numb with grief and exhaustion. He walked for hours, his steps heavy and mechanical. The device that had sealed the breach hung from his belt, its surface now dull and inert. The power it had once held, the power that had saved them all, was gone, expended in that final desperate act. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Samir found himself standing atop a cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of the desert. The wind whipped at his hair, carrying with it the scent of sand and heat. He laid Elizabeth's body down gently, his fingers brushing against her cold skin. She looked peaceful, almost as if she were sleeping. But Samir knew she would never wake again. Tears streamed down his face as he knelt beside her, his heart aching with a pain he had never known before. Elizabeth had been more than just a colleague, more than just a friend. She had been a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness, a light that had guided him through the shadows. And now she was gone, her light extinguished forever. Samir felt the weight of her loss pressing down on him, threatening to crush him beneath its weight. But he knew he couldn't let it. He had made a promise to keep fighting to protect the world from the dangers that lurked in the depths of space. Elizabeth had given her life to ensure that humanity would have a future, and Samir would not let her sacrifice be in vain. He stood, his eyes hard with determination. The sun had dipped below the horizon, the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Samir looked up at them, his gaze searching the heavens for answers he knew he would never find. The Tholians, the Void Sovereign, the secrets of the universe, they were all out there waiting to be discovered. And Samir knew that he would spend the rest of his life seeking them out, unraveling their mysteries, and ensuring that humanity would never again fall prey to their machinations. He turned his back on Elizabeth's body, his heart heavy but his resolve unshakable. The desert stretched out before him, vast and unforgiving. But Samir walked on, his steps sure and purposeful. The world would never know of the sacrifices that had been made, of the battles that had been fought in the shadows, but Samir would carry that knowledge with him, a burden and a blessing all at once. For he was the keeper of the truth, the guardian of humanity's future, and he would not rest until that future was secure, until the darkness that lurked in the depths of space was banished forever. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.